Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Refold Podcast. My name is Clayton, also known as George Pig, and I manage the community here at Refold. This week's guest is Brett. Some of you may recognize him from previous Q&As that the Japanese server has done. He's a founding member of Refold Japanese and a longtime member of the community. And I hope you enjoy this week's episode of the Refold Podcast. All right, Brett, how's it going?
It's going good. I just got back from class, so a little tired, but I'm excited.
Are you at your home in your mansion, or
Yes, I am
living?
I'm living in my mansion right now. No, I am at home.
Okay,
but on this little backdrop because I got this annoying light right up here, and
no worries.
This covers it. So
perfect. So, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I am Brett. Brett Williams Film is probably what most people know me as. I'm the admin of the Japanese Refold server, one of the admins. I did Japanese Refold for I would say a solid year. I did MIA obviously before that for probably another solid year, and haven't been as active recently as I just opened up my own martial arts school. So I've been focusing on that. But yeah, that's kind of me.
Yeah. So, and then why haven't you been doing as much Japanese?
So I haven't been doing as much Japanese. I haven't really been doing much language learning stuff in the last year at all. But I've also kind of switched to Korean because I opened up the martial arts school, and the martial arts school is Taekwondo. So Taekwondo is a Korean martial arts. So I figured, it'd be really nice because my mentor, he speaks English, but he doesn't speak fantastic English, and he gets by. But he's introducing me to all these Korean people, and he mostly speaks Korean, and he's trying to go really in depth with some of his explanation now because he's retiring, and I opened up a school, so he's handing me all the secrets. But it's hard for him to go fully in depth because I don't know Korean. So I was I should learn Korean. But I underestimated how busy the first year of a business would be. So I really haven't dove too much into that, but I am starting to get a little bit of an immersion habit going back again. So that's nice.
Cool. So Brett, you run the Refold Japanese server.
Yeah.
And you actually predate me, and I've been with Refold since day one that we went public. I joined the server, and then 3 months later I got modded, and then eventually got hired. But you predate me. When I joined, you were already an admin.
Yeah.
And recently, Refold Japanese has gone public and partnered. So how has it been? What's it like running a partnered Discord server and a big server at that?
Yeah. It's hard to say because I haven't been as active recently. I try and pop in as much as I can. I gotta say, I can definitely say with somewhat confidence, maybe Shiki has different views on this because she's more active than I am recently, but I can say with somewhat confidence that going public and partnered and being bigger now than we ever have been is nothing compared to the chaos that was the first 2-3 months of the Japanese server. Being admin by myself before I had a chance to really get any full-time mods or kind of cultivate the helper thing that we've done in the past year was chaotic, especially with how often we were raided by certain other groups and just people trying to make my life miserable. So the first it's even though we've become bigger since then, it's been much more chill because setting the tone of the server was much harder than keeping the tone of the server now that it's already established, because we have more people that are kind of on board with what we're doing and the tone that we're trying to set. So they kind of set the tone, and then new people come in and eventually find their stride. Whereas in the beginning, it was just me versus everybody almost. And it was tough. But yeah, it's been nice. The last year seems much more calm compared to the first 6 months or so of the server.
So it's calmer now.
Oh,
even though it's bigger.
Yeah.
Are you guys getting many so I'm nominally the community manager here at Refold, but I have been spending increasingly less time with the community as I spend more time doing other projects for Refold.
Right.
How has it how's it been? Have you noticed a big uptick in people joining, in people who are not familiar with immersion? Maybe people coming straight from like Duolingo or being totally green.
That's also hard to say because I feel like even in the beginning, even people that came in with the intent to do immersion learning, most of them still had no idea what immersion learning was, you know? So even the people that came in with the intent to like follow Refold, I noticed that there was a lot of education that had to happen in the beginning. That's one of the reasons that I created the Q&A bot. As imperfect as it is, it's like offloaded 95% of like the daily Q&As that the mods used to have to do. So that luckily takes care of a lot of the kind of onboarding process. There's still a lot of questions, obviously, and the mods do a fantastic job, and the helpers do a fantastic job of answering those questions, and other members. But yeah, it's always a bit of an education process. I would say even, going back to the whole like theory versus practice thing, no matter how much you read the theory, no matter how much you try and like do the method, it always you don't quite understand it until you've been doing it for a while. So there's always beginners and green people that have to be, kind of steered towards the right direction. Because even people that come in completely on board will be like, oh yeah, I'm totally on board with this immersion thing, and I'm doing 500 flashcards a day. It's like, okay, you're not really fully on board with the immersion thing then. Let's chat for a bit,
Yeah, that's a common thing. People view Anki as a panacea.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems quite convenient, just do your cards every single day and you'll get good.
Right.
And people go overboard and they're doing 500 new cards a day. It's taking them 3 hours and they're not really immersing.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine you still see some of that.
Yeah.
People still come in confused.
Yeah, a lot of people come in confused. A lot of people come in, there definitely is a little bit more. We even got it back in the day a little bit, but there is obviously a little bit more of the what is Refold questions of people in the Refold Discord. That happens every now and then still, or more still. But it even happened back in the beginning, before, when we were like much smaller. People would still come in, they'd find their way in here somehow. What is Refold, And it's always funny when somebody will like ask a question that's like very clearly written out in like the first sentence of like the quick start guide, and just be like, oh yeah, I'm doing all of the like Genki drills, what should I do next? It's like, well, the first thing you should do is stop doing all of the Genki drills. And yeah, it's kind of funny when that happens. But yeah, I definitely noticed that people like, I think the thing that draws people to kind of more traditional methods of learning is that it seems very well thought out. Like it seems very structured, and it's like, oh, this has got to be a clear path to fluency. But I think there's like a bit of what's it called? I think it's called ease of like processing bias. There's like a bias that like humans have, where the easier something is, not just the more we enjoy it, that makes sense, but the more we actually perceive it as being effective. So I think the fact that you can just like open up your flashcards and you know what you're doing, and it's like an ease of use, makes people think it's more effective than it is.
What's interesting is that we actually paid money. We paid people and found out that exact same thing.
Really?
So I don't want to call it like a white paper. We're not anything that official yet,
right?
Although we would like to be.
Yeah.
But we did hire people. We gave them 50 videos, and we had them rate the comprehension and the enjoyment of the video. And what we found was that even things that were kind of objectively boring were rated more enjoyable if they had high comprehension.
Mm-hmm.
So it checks out that people like the things they understand.
They like things they understand. They like things that are easy. They like things that are comfortable. And, it's not that you have to live all of your time in discomfort land, but some of the biggest gains come from doing the things that are uncomfortable and pushing out into that area that you don't really enjoy being in as much, So that's what I've found anyway.
So what are some of the common threads that you see among people who join the server? Some common mistakes that people make, even well-intentioned people who are familiar with immersion learning, like you said, sometimes make mistakes.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what are some common threads there?
You know, there's a lot of them. You know, in the beginning when I first started doing Refold, I was busy, but I wasn't nearly as busy as I am now, and I spent a lot of time in the Discord. And like before, like Refold coaching was a thing, I was basically kind of like doing that on my own, like coaching
As
specific
was
people.
Shiki,
You know,
as was
I think
Vanessa.
all the
That sort of.
mods kind of get people that they like take under their wing and are almost like coaching one on one. And because otherwise they probably wouldn't try and be a mod. You know, they enjoy sharing this with people, and there's a lot of things. If I was to think of some off the top of my head, I would say one thing is too much theory in the beginning, trying to cultivate this like perfect method. I don't want to make mistakes. I don't want to do this wrong. It's like the best thing you can do is do the method wrong. Like browse over the material and then do it. I don't care if you do it wrong. I don't care if like your interpretation of the material is do every single drill in Genki. You'll eventually figure out that's not the method, but do it because that experience is going to be essential for when you go back and browse the next time. Matt made a fantastic video on this called Theory versus Practice, and it's one of the few videos that like I think should be like mandatory before starting, because if you understand this relationship between getting a little bit of theory and then doing it at least 10 times more than you did the theory, like practice should be 10 to 40 times more than your theory time, in my opinion. And then on the reverse side, I would say people that do no theory and just like come in and they're like expecting to understand something completely new without even doing a little bit of research as to what it is. I think those are two mistakes that a lot of people do. I think impatience is another big problem. This was a big problem with one person I was coaching. His name is Me, being very impatient. I was very impatient at first. I'm like, oh, I'm going to do like 18 hours a day and I'm going to become fluent in Japanese in 6 months. And it's just like, I don't really see, unless you like need it for a specific reason, like, oh, your job's going to give you a promotion if you learn it in a year. I don't see any reason to put a end date goal on your fluency. Like your goal should be slowly, or for some people that can go in and just dive in hardcore. Some people are like that. You know, they can go from 0 to 100 overnight. If you're that type of person, feel free to dive in if that's what you want to do. But if you're the type of person that's like constantly quitting things, constantly procrastinating, constantly going hard for a little bit and then burning out, just do yourself a favor and start off with a goal that's impossible to fail. Like literally say, I'm going to immerse 3 minutes a day, 1 minute a day, 10 seconds a day. I don't care. Like literally follow what it says, a goal that's impossible to fail. Like you could do it every day if you were sick with a, you know, rabid dog attacking you. Like every single day you should just do it, build up the habit. Once you have a habit, it's easier to expand on it.
So just starting.
It's just basically starting. Yeah. And don't rely on motivation. Just make it a daily thing that you cannot skip. So I've been saying that like I really haven't done much immersion at all in the past year with Korean, but still just to keep it part of my daily routine so that I don't forget about it, I still did my flashcard reviews. I didn't add any more flashcards. I still get reviews because my comprehension or my retention is terrible. So I still get reviews a year later after not adding cards, but I still do my reviews and I still immerse for 5 minutes every single night before I go to bed. So it just keeps it enough on my mind that I know that like now that I have a little bit of time, I'm like looking for ways to increase that.
You have a daily minimum.
Daily minimum.
You do your Anki, and then you do a little bit of immersion.
A little bit of immersion. And immersion, you know, I wish I could drop the Anki, but because I would prefer to do a little bit of immersion, but I'm so early in the process that I don't think that'd be a good idea.
You're at the worst part of the process.
I know.
You don't have enough to actually enjoy the immersion, and yet you're also being hit with the hurdles of running your own business.
I know. Yeah, there's a part of me that kind of feels like, even though I've been a staunch supporter of one language at a time, there's a part of me that kind of feels like, you know, I might just kind of be wishy-washy with both Japanese and Korean. Have a daily minimum, but it's so much easier after a 14-hour workday to come home and do, you know, an hour of Japanese, which I can sit back and enjoy, rather than even 5 minutes of Korean that is just more mental fatigue.
Nope, I totally agree. And that's something that a lot of people in the Japanese community, for better or worse, tend to be kind of young. and they don't really understand that, you get off of a 14-hour workday, you get home, you do not have the energy.
Yeah.
And it makes those beginner stages a hurdle.
It's definitely tough. I'm slowly, believe it or not, the 5 minutes of immersion and like 5 minutes of Anki every single day have accumulated to a little bit. I've noticed it in, I'll notice words when my mentor, Grandmaster Kim, is speaking to his friends, and things will stick out. And it's more than I would have thought. It's nice, even though the beginning is tough because you don't understand anything, the beginning's also kind of awesome because you make the biggest gains. Later when you go through 2C, that's just like a desert of feeling like you're not making any progress for like a year and a half, because every word you're learning is not common enough that you're going to see it every single episode. Whereas before, everything you learned, you'd constantly see, and your comprehension's just going through the roof. And then all of a sudden it just like feels like it plateaus, but it doesn't. It's just requires a lot more to get to that point where it clicks, that you're like, oh, this is improving.
So is there an end in sight to your busyness with the dojo?
So there's no end in sight, but what it comes down to is, because a lot of people will definitely ask me you're extremely busy. How do you fit in? I don't know if this was one of the questions. Maybe I'm stomping on your toes, but people definitely always ask me you're extremely busy. How do you fit in time to immerse? And to me, all of life is just a prioritization of things that are important to you. We can't do it all. Humans can't do it all. I can't be a concert pianist and a violinist and speak 10 languages and master martial arts. And there's just not enough time to become a master in 2 things, let alone, 20 things. So everything to me is on a priority list. And year 1 of the business was literally me. Basically, I could have found time to immerse. It's not like I wasn't home, and it's not like I wasn't in front of a computer. It's just the other work was more important because I had to prioritize it, because the last thing I wanted was to be okay, well, I'm learning Korean for this future benefit, but if the business closes, then that future benefit's irrelevant. And in the first year or 2 of a business, there's no way to know how much work will prevent my business from closing. So I just wanted to put in 100% into the work. So that way, at least until I get to the point where I'm okay, well, if I spend 2 hours a day now, my business isn't going to close. It may grow a little bit slower, but it's not going to close. So I'm kind of waiting for that point where I don't feel guilty for having spent time away from the business.
And is that point still far off, you think?
I don't know. I wouldn't say it's far off. I would say I'll probably start. Technically, I never stopped immersing. It's just how much can I do to make decent progress. I'll probably start slowly upping it soon, if not, this month. Because I do really want to learn Korean. It's very hard because every time I hear Japanese, my heart is actually with Japanese, but my brain is with Korean because it makes more sense business-wise. And it stinks that I'm not at the point that I wanted to be at in Japanese. I don't have, Matt versus Japan aspirations for Japanese. I just want to be able to have deep conversations with my friends. And I'm not there yet. So that's frustrating because I have a lot of close friends because I lived in Japan for on and off for 7 years, the Genki route, forming bad habits, which I guess I could talk about a little for those that don't know my story.
Yeah, let's get into the lore. So I know that you spent 7 years off and on in Japan.
Yeah.
You were in Fukuoka at one point.
I was in Fukuoka. That was my favorite place that I lived. Technically not Fukuoka. The favorite place that I lived was Takeo. But I'll get to that. I'll try and go through quickly because I know we don't have a ton of time, but I'll try and go through quickly. But basically my story is, I never really thought that I would ever go to Japan. I had no aspirations to go to Japan. I always wanted to go to Korea. That was my original thing that I thought I would do because I've been doing Taekwondo since I was 16. And so my friend went and did study abroad in Japan. And they're like, you got to come out. I'm like, dude, if I'm going all the way out there, because at the time I had never been there before. So the other side of the world felt far away for me. Now I've been there so many times that it does not feel far away to go to the other side of the world. But it felt very far. So I'm like, if I'm going all the way out there, I'm going to Korea. He's like, no, man, you got like a free place to stay. You know, they had their own apartment because their college professor like co-signed for them, which is ridiculous. For anybody that knows Japanese people, that's like unbelievable to get somebody to co-sign something for you. So they had like their own apartment off campus. So I went there and I slept on their kitchen floor. I was supposed to stay for 2 weeks. And every 2 weeks, I just loved it so much. I was just like, can I stay 2 more weeks? So I postponed my 2 weeks all the way until the end of my 3-month visa. And I stayed with the entire 3-month visa. And then when they went home, I ended up coming back and getting my own apartment. And I did it in a very ill-advised way, which was I could not get a visa because I was making money doing freelance stuff on my own. So I didn't want to get a job teaching English or anything. I just wanted to go there with my money and like live. And they wouldn't let me do that for whatever reason. So I just kept flying back to America every 3 months to renew my visa on a visitor's visa, which made living there very difficult because I didn't have a Gaikokujin card or anything. So I couldn't get a cell phone or internet or anything. I'd have like all my friends sign for it. Getting somebody to sign for my apartment was just a nightmare. I had to offer them like all the month's rent up front plus like a bunch of money just to like sign my co-sign for my apartment. But I was able to do it. And then, yeah, I just fell in love with being there. Luckily, I was able to work from anywhere in the world. So I worked there. And then when I found out that that was illegal, I stopped doing that because I felt bad. I was just like, oh, I didn't know that. Which is also an interesting story, but it would take too long to tell.
So the Brett lore, off and on in Japan.
Off and on in Japan. And then eventually I made my way down to Fukuoka area, Takeo more specifically. And Takeo is probably one of my favorite places I've ever lived. It's like a really nice blend of like modern, of being in a kind of city that doesn't feel like the middle of nowhere, but also being in the middle of nowhere. It's like a trendy, small mountain village. So they got like this really nice library, and like the mayor there was like really trying to like make it like this tourist place. And I feel like I did a good job. It's not like it's like there's a ton to do there, but it's just a nice place to walk around. The onsen there, it's not like nice facilities, but it's got like really good water quality. It's called Takeo Onsen. And yeah, it's a really cool place. I recommend people check it out. There's also a lot of good food down there. And my favorite ramen is in Fukuoka. But then I ended up meeting a girl who would eventually become my fiance. And then that's when I lived in Fukuoka with her.
Fukuoka is famous for their ramen, right?
They are famous for their ramen, which is weird because every time I say my favorite ramen's from Fukuoka, everybody asks me, oh, Hakata ramen. Because that's like, I guess, the most famous ramen there. It's like, no, mine's like this little specialty coconut ramen that most people would probably like be like ramen purists would probably laugh at. That's at this like little tiny shop it's probably like a 10-minute walk from Tenjin Station. And if anybody wants to know what it is, just DM me or at me in the Discord and I'll send it to you. But be there. Don't bother me unless you're there. Otherwise I'll get 1,000 like pings.
So this very long journey that you've had with Japanese, what's the end game? When will you be done with Japanese?
Yeah, for me, I don't know. I think I'll be done with Korean once I feel like I can function professionally with it. One of two things will happen with Japanese. It will either be done when I feel like I can have the conversations with my friends that I want to have, or it'll never be done. One of the two. Because one thing I know is that at first, I had no interest in learning the language. I just wanted to learn enough to survive because I was living there. I'm like, I need to at least be able to order food. So that's why I like picked up Genki, and I learned in the worst way possible and formed all sorts of bad habits of just like sitting in my apartment and like drilling the math equations over and over. And that's why I can understand almost nothing, but I can like say almost anything I want to say. I can say it like it's broken and it sounds like a child, or it just sounds like a jumbled mess, but they can kind of understand what I'm saying. And I can tell you, it's one of the reasons I'm like so against like traditional language learning methods without a ton of immersion, because there's nothing more frustrating than being to express yourself and then not understand what's being said back to you. Like it's just, it makes you just not want to have conversations, because it's like, what's the point of this? I can say what I want to say through this math equation, but I don't understand anything that's coming in, you know? So you do need a lot of immersion. You have to have comprehension. Like it's probably the most important aspect.
So what was that like in the dark days when you were sort of drilling? What exactly did you do? Do you want to go in more in depth?
Yeah, sure. So basically, I just got Genki and learned every vocabulary that was in it. And I would study for like a week, and I would just like drill, and I'm like, I'm gonna go out there and I'm not gonna make any mistakes, which is just stupid. For anybody that knows language learning, they know that that's stupid. But before you understand language learning, it's like, this is the language right here. It's written out in plain English, you know, how to do language. So I would just like drill it over and over. I would like mix it up. So I'd be like, oh, I'm going to add a new vocabulary here. So that way my brain gets used to like different patterns. You know, I thought I was being clever. And then I'd go out, try and use it, wouldn't understand a word that they're saying. And my conclusion to that stupidly was, okay, time to go back and study some more. Where the actual answer was sit there until you do start understanding things, you know?
I think that's a common thing.
Yeah.
Language classes or traditional methods, language tapes will teach you how to ask where Bueno Station is, but not understand the response.
Exactly. And then you just have to say like, you know, oh, you have to learn the phrase, my Japanese isn't very good and I didn't understand that. And eventually they start pointing, which is helpful. Luckily, Japanese people are very helpful, and I got very lucky because almost every single time I was actually lost, like legitimately lost, some girl would come up that spoke English and offer to help, you know, help me find where I'm going. There's always girls, though, that I think they're just more helpful.
So how did your sort of experience with Japanese, going from drills to MIA to Refold, and then eventually to Korean, how did that inform your Korean learning? How did that impact it?
Yeah, so I wanna preface this by saying don't take anything that I'm saying that I'm doing with Korean as advice. I'm the type of person, for those of you that do know me and have seen my update videos, I'm the type of person that is completely okay with slowing down the process to do experiments, just because otherwise, like, I can't get my mind off the experiment. So I try things all the time, and 99.9% of the time it's a waste of time. And it would have been better for me to just stick with, you know, the Refold recommended advice. But there's also been a couple times where I was just like, oh, I think I got a better method. And now Refold recommends that. Not because of me, but just because eventually when we learn more, we just start going that way. So there's a couple things that I've gotten right.
Refold has been iterative. The early models of Refold were based on a lot on Matt, and a little bit of Ethan.
Yeah.
And
you could definitely tell based off of the like old Matt, you can definitely see exactly where Ethan was an influence to, in my opinion. For those that know Matt very well, I think you can definitely see where Ethan was an influence. But I mean, but without Matt, like even the initial iteration, it would have never been nearly as good. Like he had a lot of great ideas. It's just, it was, you know, early version, and the early version is always not as good as it can become. And that's why I really like Refold, because they're not dogmatic. Ethan's very iterative. He's got that like growth mindset, that improvement mindset. So that's why I know that, like, even though I don't think any method, people swear by their methods, I don't think any method has it perfect yet. I think Refold will get there because of how willing they are to change when they have new information. But what were we talking about? Sorry.
We were talking about how your Japanese learning impacted your Korean learning.
Yes, that's right. So one thing that I'm trying because of that is I'm going the opposite direction. I started Japanese and I came into immersion learning with such a deficit in proper Japanese. I had a really bad accent. I had patterns that were so solidified because I practiced them alone over and over and over that my instincts were not very well formed, because even if I knew how to say something properly, I couldn't trust in Japanese that I was saying it properly, because I didn't know, was this an instinct that I formed through artificial means, or was this an instinct that I formed through input? Now, the more that I did input, the more I saw that like doubt in my instincts slowly melt away. But I never got to the point where that was away to a significant degree. Every single like conversation I had multiple sentences where I didn't trust my instincts because I wasn't sure where it was coming from. So I'm going the opposite way with Korean. I'm not looking at any grammar. I haven't looked at one grammar thing yet. I browsed the grammar primer just to kind of give you guys some feedback on it. But that's about it. And I liked it. I thought it was good. But I'm finding that Korean and Japanese grammar are similar enough that I'm enjoying actually deconstructing the grammar like like a puzzle, more so than getting the answers. And I feel like if I did like Spanish or French or German or Italian, something that was more similar to English, I think I would do the same thing. If I continue to like it. I'm sure at some point I'll start looking at grammar because I'll reach a dead end. But so far, I've very much enjoyed not looking at any grammar at all. Yeah. I've also been trying some experiments of further minimizing my SRS experience. I've been doing a lot of things where I'll do like little sprints with new words and then quick retire them. So I'm not like using them to like actually remember them for the long term. I just kind of use them to get a mental spot in my brain kind of started. And then mostly once I get to the point where I just recognize a word, even if I don't know what it is, as long as I recognize it and I feel like it would stand out in immersion, I just get rid of it because I'm trying to minimize my SRS exposure. I don't want to eliminate it because I do think it's a good tool, but I do want to find further ways to minimize it. So those are two things I think that I'm doing very differently with Korean. Korean's going to be a much different experience because I don't have any foundation in it other than listening to my mentor speak. So
You're going into it with immersion as the start.
Exactly.
And it's definitely easier to get into immersion if you do have a foundation, even if it's a foundation that comes from drilling Genki and building this sort of flawed interlanguage, this learner language. And I can attest to that. Yeah. Having some foundation makes immersion easier.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt himself had a traditional foundation before he got into AJAT.
Right.
And, going in with just a frequency Anki deck and a dream is really hard.
Yeah. That's why I generally... Sorry, go ahead.
I think it's effective.
Yeah.
But it definitely... books have training wheels that immersion doesn't, and it can make sort of getting over that hump, getting your first couple thousand words under your belt, even if it's artificial, even if it's sort of like we've all heard the second language speaker, oh, how do you do, Brett? And no one says how do you do in 2023.
Exactly.
But it's textbook language, but it's understandable.
Right.
And it does provide a foundation, even if it's a little bit artificial.
Yeah. I think faith in what you're doing is so incredibly important. That's why I give advice, and sometimes the advice I give, I'll tell people, sometimes I'll have conversations with some of the really advanced learners, and they'll ask me, and we'll have conversations about language learning, and then they'll disagree with a piece of advice that I'll give. And sometimes I think that they're just flat out right. Oh yeah, I never really thought about it that way because I'm not as advanced as they are. But other times the answer is because I don't want to create a expert learning method for people that aren't experts yet. I think for beginners, you need to have a rope if you're climbing a mountain. And if you're giving advice that I think is, free soloing, I don't think it's the best way to do it, even though an expert would probably get up the mountain quicker by not using equipment, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think that faith also in the method is really important. The more faith you have in the method, the more you're able to get through those times where you aren't seeing the progress. And now that I'm in a second language, the faith is solid.
Was the faith.
Yeah.
We didn't want to be compared to a cult.
Right.
A sort of Krashen cult who worship Krashen, and we wanted to be a little bit more scientific and and such, but I think that faith and hope, hunky in a dream can
Yeah.
definitely take you far.
It's incredibly difficult because I run into this with the school too, because for beginners, it's really best for beginners if they can just like trust their instructor and go through the early, phases and stuff like that. And there's a whole ton of nuance that comes into the equation that you can't appreciate, and it's really not worth hearing until after you're more advanced. So it's like I feel like sometimes the discussions that are had around language learning, even though I think they're fine to listen to and they're great to have for advanced learners, I feel like they're not super beneficial all the time for beginners, because it's like you're just making it more difficult. Like this nuance isn't even going to be able to be appreciated by you because you don't understand. You don't have like a visceral understanding of the method yet. You have just a knowledge understanding of the method. So it's like it's really difficult to stay true to what you think is like the actual truth of the matter with all the nuance and all of the gray areas, while also trying to convey a beginner's message to people, because you almost have to kind of lie a little bit. Not lie, but like you almost have to kind of like dumb it down and make it able to be understood by the beginner so that they have a path that they can see. I don't know if that makes sense, but this is something I struggle with martial arts instruction too.
Yeah, I noticed that with having been a teacher and also doing some Refold coaching, not as much as Vanessa, is that establishing trust with the person is a prerequisite for them to actually be able to start learning from you. They have to have either faith in you or the method.
Yeah.
And then, obviously running a dojo and teaching, if someone comes in and they're skeptical, they're not going to trust you to teach them correctly.
Right.
That can cause friction and prevent them from learning. And there's definitely a social skill aspect component to like proving that you're trustworthy. Now, obviously, you have your mentor. When it comes to the dojo, you have your mentor, so on and so forth. And I do think that sometimes having social, I don't want to call it clout, but social proof in the form of like, this is my mentor. He's really good.
Right.
He trained me. You can trust me. And then like other students vouching for you as a teacher, or having the Refold name behind you as a mod, people can say, okay, it's trustworthy enough, and it's a very complex issue, because if someone doesn't trust you or the method, they are not going to make as much progress.
And then there's also like the downside of that, because once you build up a good brand, once you build up a good trust, once you build up a way to get people on board, there's a lot of people that kind of use that prematurely to kind of start culting it up a little bit. I think we've seen that a lot in the language learning community. People get really, really hardcore about their method. And it's like, guys, if you step back for a second, yeah, the details are different, but all of us are talking about immersion learning. And really, that's the main part of it anyway. As long as you're immersing, you're going to make progress. The little details, I think, can be fine-tuned. But the main part's going to be the immersion, and we're all talking about that. Like, we should be on the same team, but they get really like teamy about it. And then that ends up reflecting bad on the community as a whole, whether it's, an individual community or the immersion community in general.
I keep trying to pull us away from religion, but it's almost like sectarianism in religion.
Yeah.
We all, and again, I hate that Refold is associated with being a cult, a religion of crashing and input. But you've got some immersion learners who believe in, you should read from day one and you should do mostly reading. Right. And you've got another group who say you should never read at all ever because it'll ruin your accent.
Right.
And it's sort of the parallels to religion and religious sectarianism are very striking when it comes to the immersion learning community. Yeah.
I definitely have views on that, but like almost all my views, even though I give specific advice in the like if I'm talking to a general audience, I'll have one piece of advice. If I'm talking to somebody that I know and whose goals I know, I'll probably have a different piece of advice. and another person that I know whose goals are different, I'll probably have a different piece of advice. So it's like the stage is very important when you take into account like what advice is being given. And I'd be willing to bet that there's a lot of things that people take very, very like dogmatically that Matt has said, that he's probably thinking of a very specific situation from this specific question answer or asker. And then he says it, and now people take it as like, oh, that's the law of Matt versus Japan or whatever it was. Exactly. And I saw a lot of that like leak through when we became Refold from MIA, and even before MIA, all this stuff kind of leaking through. And it was just weird to see how it sticks like that. And it's like, as you become more knowledgeable in these things, you start to see the gray area. Like for me, the reading debate has always been a little silly. To me, it's like, well, what do you want? In my opinion, the reading debate comes down to, do you want to have the best accent possible? If you want the best accent possible and you're willing to take longer to get it, well then yeah, probably listening is going to benefit you more. Do you want to learn quicker? Well then probably reading is going to benefit you more, because you'll have a better comprehension of the language, because you have to process every single word. So it slows down to your level. So it's like, where's the balance in that? Do you want it to be good at both of them? Well, then probably a balanced approach. Like to me, it's not one or the other. Like almost every piece of advice I give is based off of situation and goals.
I think reading comes ahead in a lot of ways just because it's so dense.
It is.
You see me in a Refold shirt right now.
Mm-hmm.
But if you didn't see me and you were if someone were describing it to you like over the radio or over a book through text, they would say, okay, Clayton Gorg, he's looking sick because he is sick. He's got a purple Refold shirt on, and then on the shirt there's a bird, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just very linguistically dense, whereas like manga, conversations, TV shows are less dense. That's my theory.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much a processing thing.
Yeah.
It's just the fact that it's linguistically dense.
It's very linguistically dense. And that's why I think that if your goal is quickest path to comprehension and you don't mind taking longer to develop your accent, or possibly, sacrificing a little accent, that's the way to go. But
yeah,
I definitely wouldn't, and I could be wrong about this, but I personally, if somebody came to me and they said, the most important thing to me, I don't care how long it takes, most important thing to me is having as close to a native accent as possible, I would recommend to them doing a very heavy listening approach. Personally, I feel like there's probably like a lot of little pitch accent changes and things that you're going to get a lot more exposure to through listening a lot, that are going to benefit that goal, as opposed to saying, I want to comprehend as quickly as possible.
Now, I want to take a step back, and I want to ask about the server again.
Mm-hmm.
Early on, you guys had a lot of events, a lot of Q&As and things. Yeah. Is there any plan to bring those back?
That's the hard thing about being in my position, because I don't have as much time to do that stuff. It would probably have to come upon the other admins and mods to find time to do that. I don't know if they have time to do it. I would love to do that more. I miss doing that. I really enjoy the Q&As that we would do, and we do plan on still doing them as often as we can. They've been more kind of impromptu recently. Like I'll be like, okay, I don't have to like focus on this. I'm just cleaning the school. So I'll just like be like quickly start a Q&A. So they've been more kind of like impromptu rather than like planned 2 weeks ahead of time like we used to. So we still do try and do them, but it's just it's as much as I love Refold, my mission to accomplish with the school is more important to me right now, unfortunately. But I do love Refold, and I wish I had time to do more of that, because I really enjoy doing that, and I love teaching people about immersion learning. It like saved me. I feel like I'm just paying back the debt I owe to Refold.
Yeah, and you're still the main method for teaching people kana. When we get the odd learner who's never learned kana, your video that you made, and nice. The deck, and I think Tofugu, their material, they allowed us to use it to provide this free deck.
Yes.
So I'm very thankful to you for that video. and for the Tofugu for letting us, use their material in a free deck.
Yeah, people really like those mnemonics. I think that they're really useful too. And I always was frustrated that there was like never one. I thought it was weird that there was never a method that actually, not that I know of anyway. When I learned Japanese, the kana were always presented as like, I don't know how many there actually are, but as like 100 and something characters. But it's not. It's like a base amount of characters and then just modifications of those characters. So it always boggled my mind that there was never a method out there that really presented them in that way, where you could just like learn the base characters and then figure out how to modify them, because it seemed so much easier. And then I also wanted to create something that was a little bit more immersion focused, because I'm always trying to figure out ways to get people not to rely on the SRS to the best of my ability. So that was one way to try and do that. So that's why I came up with that method. And I used it I wasn't sure, because anytime you make something coming from a position of having experience, it's always kind of hard, because you're like, is this going to actually work for a beginner? Or is this just me theorizing?
There's a formal term for that. There's a formal term for like when somebody who's more advanced cannot put themselves in the shoe of a beginner.
In the shoe of a beginner, yeah.
There's a formal term for it. I've been trying to think of it ever since you mentioned it earlier. You alluded to it. But I'm almost sure there's a term for it that refers to it very succinctly. Being, and it, there's a disconnect. I remember I wrote, I think 3 like basically completely different versions of the quick start guides.
Mm-hmm.
And when I showed them my first version to some people, I was very proud, and they were like, only a language nerd would think that this was clear and concise and simple.
Right.
So I had to rewrite them, and then I had to rewrite them because you come from that position of like just knowing things.
Yeah. I remember there was not to throw you under the bus, but I remember that there was one note I remember you made on the Japanese grammar primer when we were working on it, and I remember you like saying something. I don't remember the exact thing, but you did say something about like a term that we were using, and you were like, I think it'd be more clear if we use this term. And me being a grammar idiot, I was just like, I have no idea what that means. So maybe other people also might not know what that means. But I forget which point we were talking about.
Probably. It's been a while. I probably said something about stative verbs.
Maybe, yeah. I think that might have been it. I was like, I don't know what that is. I'm sure smart
stative
people
verbs
do, but
are verbs that function like adjectives.
Okay, yeah.
And I think Japanese has a couple.
They do.
As does Filipino.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference between them and like they conjugate like a verb. They act like a verb,
Mm-hmm.
but then like they play the role of an adjective, right? That they tell you the state of the thing. I probably was like, we should just call these state. That has come up to bite me a couple of times, because Tagalog.com also calls stative verbs adjectives, and I'm like, they're not adjectives, they're verbs. They're very clearly verbs. They handle like a verb.
Right.
I still not to pull myself out of the bus. I still think it's once you explain the term, I think it makes more sense than calling something an adjectival verb or whatever. But yeah, they're.
I mean, I get what you're saying. It's not that you're necessarily wrong. It would require a tad bit more education in a very condensed thing. But it wouldn't have been bad if we went that route. I was just like, I definitely don't know what that means, so we're gonna have to explain that.
yeah, and that's definitely something that has happened, and that happened even when Matt was writing the guide. Just things that you take for granted, other people may not have access to.
Mm-hmm.
Like in some cultures, you hold the fork with your left hand,
right,
and the spoon with your right hand.
Mm-hmm.
So I can remember when I was fresh off the boat in the Philippines, I had my fork in my right hand and my spoon in my left hand. And everybody looked at me like I was a crazy person, because that's just not how it's done, and it had never occurred to them that I wasn't doing it wrong on purpose. But they had that cultural knowledge that I didn't have. They
Right.
had that base of knowledge, and it's easy to like if you've grown up with that. It's easy to be like, it's like my hometown is a refugee center,
Mm-hmm.
and we would train people how to use like washing machines and all sorts of like basic, quote unquote, basic things that we take for granted in a developed country, an industrialized country.
Right.
That people who like they're coming from refugee camps in Burma, they don't know how to do. And so much of it is just like you don't know what you know, and you don't know what other people don't know.
Yeah. I know that makes it so difficult because everybody's starting from a different place. Everybody looks at things from a different point of view. It just makes it hard to communicate things, especially at scale. When you're trying to like make a guide that many people are going to look at, it makes it difficult. I remember me running into that technologically when I was setting up the Discord server, because at times I would like create like little things that I thought were very easy, like, okay, read this paragraph and click the button, and then I just get thousands of, not thousands, like dozens of DMs a day. I can't get into the Discord. It's like the button is right there. To me it seemed like obvious, but to them it wasn't.
I actually think that Discord is not a very friendly piece of chat software.
No.
If you did not grow up with IRC or like Discord type things, a lot of people who grew up with like WhatsApp or Telegram or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
they're used to like very like simple. You go, there's like one chat room having like, what do you mean there's different channels? And you have to like click reaction roles to onboard and stuff.
Yeah.
And especially for people in the rest of the world where like phones are really common, like some people, for some parts of the world, just the mobile is how they access the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Discord's very clunky on mobile. And I can understand how like the oversight there, like when you're a power user, you don't think, oh, this is going to be difficult.
Right. I remember even just having the emoticons or whatever, the emojis, the reactions apply roles and do certain things was a problem because some people only access it on their mobile phone. And then I'd have to like explain 10 times a day, oh, there's a setting you have to go in and turn on the ability to see emojis or whatever. And it's just like all sorts of things like that. It's just like, man.
But luckily, Vanessa, I think, made a new onboarding flow, and Discord now has all that built in, like what channels you want to see and all that.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of not really knowing what that looks like because as a super admin, I just see everything.
Yeah, same.
But I think Discord has found a way to make that simpler. So Discord's also iterating.
Yeah, and it's frustrating because Discord, for whatever reason, I had an alt account so that I could like test things out. And then they decided to lock me out of my alt account because I didn't have a phone number associated with it, but I can't put my phone number on both accounts. So it's just like, well, I can't do it then. Actually, I think that's my fault. I turned on the must need a phone number on our server because we were getting attacked so often, and I might be able to take that off now, but I'm not sure. I'm worried.
Yeah, and I always feel bad about that because there's some people who don't have phones.
Right.
And anytime a server is getting raided, I'm like, turn on the phone number thing, but also say, hey, sorry, this might affect some of you who don't have.
Yeah.
Because again, love Refold, but the core of Refold tended to be sort of this well-ish to do middle-class white guy.
Mm-hmm.
When I first came into Refold, there was not a lot of like, some phones don't run Discord very well, or some people may not have the technological literacy. A lot of our mod team were sort of like the stereotypical who you'd expect to be running a Japanese language immersion Discord, and like above average tech literacy.
Mm-hmm.
People who are like, oh yeah, this Python script. I'm not a dev, but I can use a Python script,
Right.
But a lot of people can't. They would see a command line and they would be like, oh no, this is, and yeah. The old days were rough, I think, where we had to learn as a whole community, like how to interact with normies and how to phrase things for like raw beginners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey. There's a lot of things, and the other thing that's really tough is that there's kind of eras of the server, and certain things that are lessons that I learned might be different. So it's like there's definitely, now that Cheeky's more of a you know one of the main kind of doers in the Discord server, because I'm not around very much to do things. There's certain changes that she makes, and I'll give her advice. Like, well, we've tried that already, and this is why it didn't work then. But it's like you can't say that that's not a reason to try it now, because there's like eras, and it's like in the beginning was different than now, and we may not have the same problems that we had in the beginning that we have now. So it's like at a certain point, the experience kind of like fades away, and you have to get new experience.
I see that same thing when it comes to Refold coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So the coaching was originally for people going from like stage 1 to stage 2C.
Right.
And then Vanessa and Ethan, they ran some experiments and did a whole bunch of stuff when I stepped away from coaching. And now there's this whole stage 3 coaching curriculum. And I hitherto have not run anyone through it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really familiar with it. And she's actually my go-to about stage 3 related things that we have found working with Ethan and working with a couple of internal clients, as well as a couple of actual clients who have gone through the stage 3 curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
So I can remember 10 months ago when I was the one who knew all about coaching, and Vanessa was
Right.
coming to me. But since she's become the main coach and I've been doing other things, I frequently turn to her. The table turns.
Mm-hmm. You gotta keep in it, otherwise the new information comes quick, so you gotta
Mm-hmm.
keep in it. That's for sure. But
yeah, Brett, I think this was a lovely podcast. My takeaway is that things change.
Definitely.
And it's been a pleasure knowing you the past 2 years or so. And
thank you.
Yeah,
it's been great being around. I love the Refold community. I'm really happy that you're a part of it. I remember, I don't know how soon you became like a employee, but I think we've interacted quite a bit before you were officially hired. Mm-hmm. And I just remember being like, well, this guy's awesome. So I hope he does more. But luckily they hired you so you can do more as your job.
Yeah, that was that was nice. Yeah, I was kind of doing a lot of the moderation for free, and I had a period at my old job when I was working at an Eikaiwa. I was like, well, I've got to, sometimes working as a teacher paid per class, it was feast or famine.
Yeah.
Some weeks I would have a bajillion classes and a bajillion bookings. Others I wouldn't. So I was sort of flaky at points, and then being brought on to actually manage the Discord server and the subreddits allowed me to actually take time out of my day to do that. Because labors of love are great, but at the end of the day we have to make money so that we can survive and thrive. But
for sure.
I do want to say before I go, I'm going to pressure Vanessa to host more Q&As.
Nice.
I would like to see them brought back.
Yeah, they were fun, and I like it because even though we end up answering a lot of the same questions, sometimes for whatever reason, people, they just want to hear you respond to their question, even if that same question is answered in a Q&A somewhere. There's something about it. And, as moderators, as helpers, as anybody that wants to help other people find immersion learning, I feel like it's our responsibility to them to try and get as many people on board with this method that, in my opinion, seems quite superior to other methods, to be patient with them and do whatever we can to build that trust. And if that means answering some questions that are already in the document, so be it. So I think it's good to, whoever can do the Q&As, I'll try and do as many as I can, but whoever can do the Q&As, I think it's good because it's a good opportunity for people to kind of get their questions answered and anything that they're not understanding, be able to have it explained to them a little bit more one-on-one.
I think it's really good for building the community.
Mm-hmm.
I think it strengthens the community relationship with the mods and the Pata people
Mm-hmm.
and the people who are new coming in. Um, the podcast is on season 3 now, but early on, it started as believe it or not, this podcast started out as a book club podcast where we discussed the community book club.
Oh, nice.
We always ran out of things to talk about. The second half of it became a Q&A.
Right.
And I really miss that. The new format is great. It's really cool. But I had kind of hoped that Vanessa and maybe Bree would sort of take the reins on doing once a month sort of old style podcast Q&As with the community,
Mm-hmm.
doing lives or stages or something. Because I think they're just really good for building community.
Yeah. I agree. I definitely noticed, I don't know if it was necessarily directly related, but I definitely noticed, but again, the servers go through phases, but I noticed a lot more, immersion club interactions and interactions between people outside of just the off topic and language learning channels back when we were doing a lot more events. And it bothers me a little bit that I don't have time to do more of that, because I think it was not only a lot of fun for me, but I think people enjoyed it, and it just allowed people to kind of, find people to do things with in the server and then immerse more, which is the ultimate goal. Try and find any way to trick people into immersing.
I agree. I'm going to wrap it up here. This was a fantastic podcast. We are at time.
Awesome.
And I would love to have you back on sometime. Any
Cool.
parting words?
Parting words. You know what? I do have some parting words, even though this probably should have came in earlier. One thing because this just came up at school, so it's on my mind. So I'm gonna share it with everyone. This is life advice, but it applies to language learning also. The main thing that I can say to people as you're getting involved in this is it's going to be frustrating at times, and at times you're going to feel like other people have talents that you don't. It's a complete illusion. Yes, some people have talents that you don't, but I am probably the worst person at learning languages. My SRS retention rate is like 60% ever since I got COVID. It was like 75% before I got COVID. So it's always been bad. And yet when I was putting the time in, I was making progress. The only times I wasn't making progress is when I wasn't putting the time in. So just go easy on yourself, be patient, and find a way to make it part of your daily life and slowly increase it. Don't compare yourself to other people.
All right. I think that's a wonderful word of wisdom from Brett. And guys, I will see you next week. I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Refold Podcast. If you're watching the live premiere, you're in luck. Right as it ends, we have an after party over on the Refold Central Discord server. Come join us by using refold.link/join and chat about the episode. If you enjoyed the podcast and would like to hear more, you can find older episodes to listen to on YouTube and Spotify. Let us know what you thought about the video by liking and leaving a comment below. Do you have suggestions for upcoming visitors or requests for particular topics? Please feel free to reach out to me on Discord at GeorgePig #5413 or via email at clayton@refold.la. Thank you all for watching and or listening, and I'll see you next week.